Day 3. Today I will listen to 2 stories and write details I remember from each story. The first story is called If You Give a Dog a Donut. We listened to this a few days ago. Let's see. You should remember this story.
Give a Dog a Donut by Laura Numeroff, illustrated by Felicia Bond. If you give a dog a donut, he'll ask for some apple juice to go with it. When you give him the juice, he'll drink it all up. Then he'll ask for more. There won't be any left, so he'll want to make his own. He'll go outside to pick apples. When he's up in the tree, he'll toss you one. Throwing the apple will make him think of baseball. He'll want to play. You'll have to get a ball and a glove. Of course, he'll also need a bat. He'll ask you to pitch. He'll hit a home run. Then he'll do a happy dance to celebrate. Dancing will make him hot and dusty, so he'll need some water. He'll probably start a water fight. You'll have to dry him off with your bandana. He'll wrap it around his head and pretend that he's a pirate. Then he'll want to go on a treasure hunt. He'll find an old kite and want to make one himself. You'll have to get him some sticks, paper, and string. When the kite is finished, he'll want to fly it. It will go higher and higher. Until it gets tangled in the apple tree. The tree will remind him of apple juice, so he'll probably ask you for some. And chances are, if he asks for some apple juice, he'll want a donut to go with it. The end.
All right. So, think back to what happened in that story. The dog wanted to do a whole bunch of things. He wanted to play baseball. He wanted to dance. He wanted to be a pirate. All right, and remember those things as you are listening to the next story. It's called If You Give a Moose a Muffin.
If you give a moose a muffin. If you give a moose a muffin, want some jam to go with it. So you'll bring out some of your mother's homemade blackberry jam. When he's finished eating a muffin, he'll want another, and another, and another. When they're all gone, he'll ask you to make more. You'll have to go to the store to get some muffin mix. He'll want to go with you. When he opens the door and feels how chilly it is, he'll ask to borrow a sweater. When he puts the sweater on, he'll notice one of the buttons is loose. He'll ask for a needle and thread. He'll start sewing. The button will remind him of the puppets his grandmother used to make. So he'll ask for some old socks. He'll make sock puppets. When they're done, he'll want to put on a puppet show. He'll need some cardboard and paints. Then, he'll ask you to help make the scenery. When the scenery is finished, he'll get behind the couch, but his antlers will stick out. So he'll ask for something to cover them up. You'll bring him a sheet from your bed. So he'll use the sheet to clean up the mess. Then he'll ask for some soap to wash it out. He'll probably want to hang the sheets up to dry. He'll go outside to put it on the clothesline. When he's out in the yard, he'll see your mother's blackberry bushes. Seeing the blackberries will remind him of her jam. He'll probably ask you for some. And chances are, if you give him the jam, he'll want a muffin to go with it.
Okay, very good. Now think back to what happened during that story. I remember that the moose ate a muffin and it made him want some jam. I remember that he wanted to put on a puppet show. And, they almost went to the store. They'd got into a lot of trouble. Alright. Your paper should look something like this. It has one side that says same and one side that says different. Look at the side that says same. I want you to think about things that were the same about both stories. I'll give you the first one. The first thing that I thought was the same about both stories was that both animals in the story wanted more and more things. They just kept wanting to do things. So, I want you to pause the video when you're ready and think of 2 more things that were the same and write them next to 2 and 3. When you're finished, push the play button again and we'll talk about how the stories are different. All right. You should have 3 things written for how the stories are the same. Anything that you thought was the same about both stories is great. I know that there was a boy in both stories, so maybe you wrote something about that. I know that both stories had something to do with food. Remember, the moose wanted the muffin and the dog wanted the donut. They're not the same food, but they're both about foods. Let's move on to the other side. How are the 2 stories different? So think back. Let's do number 4. Number 4 is about if you give a moose a muffin. So let's think back to the moose story for a second. What's something that only happened in the moose story? It did not happen in the donut story. Think about it for a second. Pause the video and write or draw your answer in the box. When you're ready, push the play button again to continue. All right. So you should have written one thing that happened in the If You Give a Moose a Muffin story that was different than something that happened in the If You Give a Dog a Donut story. So let's move on to number 5. If you give a dog a donut. Think about one thing that happened in the story that was different than the moose story. It only happened in the dog story. Think about it and write it down or draw a picture. When you're finished, push the play button and we'll continue. All right. Here are some possible things you could have put. In the moose story, for number 4, you could have written that the moose wanted to put on a puppet show. And for number 5, the dog wanted to play baseball outside. Those are not the only 2 answers. There are a bunch of different answers. So whatever you put is probably right. All right. Let's go on to the last thing. Flip your paper over. All I want you to do is draw a picture of the story that you liked better. Don't forget to add colors, details, and if you can, sound out the words to the title of the story. What was the story called again? And write it at the top. When you're finished, you may do task number 2.